Bonjour French 1. Today we're going to be covering the words for colors, not just learning the actual words for the colors, but also talking about how the endings on colors change based on whether you're describing something that is masculine in that color or something that is feminine in that color, just like all the other describing words that we learned earlier in the year. So let's start on the left-hand side of the page and at least make sure that you know the French words for the colors. I'm going to pause after each word so that you can repeat after me and practice your pronunciation. The word for pink is rose. The word for red is rouge. The word for orange is orange. The word for yellow is jaune. The word for green is vert. The word for blue is bleu. The word for purple is violet. And then there's that feminine form there that we'll talk about that's slightly irregular from most of our rules with violette. The word for gray is gris. The word for black is noir. And the word for white is blanc. And again, it has an irregular feminine form, blanche. Just to expand your color describing skills, if you also want to say something like dark blue or dark green, you can use the word foncé after the color. So dark blue would be bleu foncé, dark green would be vert foncé. And for light blue or light green, you use the word clair after the color. So light blue would be bleu clair, and light green would be vert clair. Now the tricky thing about adjectives or describing words, including colors, is that they change based on what they are describing and where they go in the sentence. So two things to know about adjectives. First thing is where they go. They always go after whatever they are describing. Filling this along with you. Basically in English, when we say something like I have a blue car, we put the word blue before the word car. But in French, the word order is a little different. They'll say that they have a car blue. So be careful with that. Whenever you see these examples and you're wondering why it's out of order, it's because they do things different than in English. The other thing you have to know is that the adjectives have to agree with what they're describing. So don't forget, we already talked about this earlier in the year. If you are describing something that is masculine and a certain color, remember there's nothing that you have to do to make a color masculine in its original form, just like all other describing words. A color is naturally masculine. If, however, you wanted to make a color feminine, normally you add the letter E to that color. Now, there were two exceptions to that rule that you could see over there, and that was how violet actually had an extra T before the E for the feminine form of purple, and the word for white actually had an H before the E. So there are two exceptions. And also don't forget, if there's a color that naturally ends in the letter E, such as the color yellow, and there's already an E there because that's how it's spelled in the masculine form, you don't add another E. Again, this is all stuff we talked about before, but I wanted to remind you. Don't forget, if you are describing something that's masculine and plural, you'll need to add the letter S to that color. And then it just stands to reason that if you're describing something that is both feminine and plural, that you would have to add an E to make the color feminine and an S to make it plural. So when you come down here and you're saying how I have a green book, and we want to use the word green to describe un livre. This on here automatically clues you in that book is indeed masculine if you didn't have it memorized. So you take the word green and you have to make it masculine, which is a trick question because remember, in its original form, it's already masculine. So there's the right answer, no problem. If, however, you wanted to say something like he has a blue car, when you look at the word voiture, if you forgot, une will clue you in that voiture, car, is actually a feminine word. So when you go to write in the word blue, you need to take the word blue and you need to make it feminine, which again, if you remember from either earlier in the year or from a moment ago, the way you make a color feminine is by adding the letter E. Now don't forget the little rule though down here with a red car. Again, car is still feminine, so you go to write red and then you go, wait a second, there's already an E there. Remember, you don't double the last letter if what you're going to add is already there. So potentially you could describe something that's masculine as being red or something that's feminine as being red, and the color red's going to stay the same. So make sure you bring this back with you next class so we can practice working with these colors a bunch more.